They have a combined 12 years in the National Football League. They combined for 65 career sacks, 232 tackles, 1 Pro Bowl selection, and 1 Employee of the Month award.
That's just a straight shooter with upper management written all over him.
It's Train and Grose on the All AZ Podcast Network.
Welcome in, Train and Grose. Coming to you from the train station studios in downtown Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah.
It's getting warm out, B-Train.
Yeah, it is, brother. It's that time of year. It's June. Summertime is here, and the temperature is steadily rising.
Stressing the hydration.
Better hydrate, brother. You got to make sure you hydrate, because if you don't, you can find yourself on the bad end of a fallout situation, and that's never good.
No, definitely not. Lots to get to here in this week's edition of Train and Grose. We've got NBA playoffs. Phoenix Suns dispatched the Los Angeles Lakers, and now they're in the middle of it with the Denver Nuggets. Lots of other NBA playoff action going on, news and notes, some news from college football here in the early summertime.
Yeah.
And whatever else we feel like talking about. We've got Pump the Brakes. Came walking in today, and the crack staff behind the scenes working on the final edits for that. And then I know you. You're working hard on dad jokes.
I mean, come on. You know, I keep a stable of them. That's just how I do. That's how I roll, bro.
Well, there we go. But let's start with the Phoenix Suns, where we've been starting for the better part of the last couple months. And all the hand-wringing about the Lakers, trying to avoid the Lakers. Lakers are out. Lakers, they got banged up, and, LeBron dinged up.
Anthony Davis
banged up, and the cast of characters behind him not strong enough.
Yeah.
And the Suns now, as we said, they're up 2-0 as we record this. Always the caveat. Never know when you're going to pick up Train and Grose. So it could be Game 3 already behind us by the time you hear this, but that's for the line in the sand. That's what we're talking about. But, man, they looked impressive in the first 2 games. And I want to start with this because, I always go to you when we talk about what's a professional athlete thinking?
Sure.
And obviously Denver didn't play well. It was not a good look in either of the first 2 games. But the head coach comes out after the fact.
Yeah.
And he gives this speech, man. If I didn't look up and see that it was the head coach of the Denver Nuggets, I'm like, is this a high school coach saying, I got to find 5 guys who want to play? I don't know who it is on my roster. And boy, if I can't find these 5 guys that really want – this is the NBA playoffs,
He used the Q word 3 times. He said quit. My team quit 3 times.
Like,
you got to have a lot of clout in the locker room to do that when you're talking about professional athletes, I would imagine.
Sound awfully Jim Mora-ish.
Right?
Yeah. I've been there. Trust me, I've been there. Not fun.
Does that work on professional athletes?
No. It pisses them off.
If you're in the Denver Nuggets locker room right now, what are you thinking walking out of there after Game 2?
Well, you're disappointed because you got ran out of there, but you don't need the coach to go out there and publicly spank you, if you will, for lack of better words. And I think they understand they've got to play better, but they also understand that they've got 5 more games to get this thing turned around. So you don't put too much pressure into one game.
Yeah.
One game does not a series make. But I'm telling you right now, Mike, if they have any aspirations of coming back in the series, Game 3 is a must-win, and I mean a must-win for the Denver Nuggets.
No, and I absolutely agree with that. The coach speak, take that out of the equation. You're absolutely right. It was not a good look. I mean, in both games, the Nuggets hung around early, and then you could just see the Suns coming. And they both games, particularly Game 2, ran them out of the building.
Mike, I think the Suns have had the best luck that you could possibly have as far as seedings and teams that they're playing at the time that they're playing them, because you played the Lakers basically without Anthony Davis and with a banged-up LeBron James, and nobody else cared to step up to play in that series. Then you go to the Denver Nuggets, no Jamal Murray. That is a huge, huge advantage for the Phoenix Suns. They're playing right now, Mike, with no fear. They do not fear the Denver Nuggets at all. And for a team that is making their first playoff appearance in 11 years, you would think a team would have a few more jitters, a few more clunkers of games because they just hadn't been there. They hadn't had that playoff experience. But this team is playing as if they've been there the last 11 years straight.
Yeah.
And they have absolutely no fear of whoever it is that they're playing. They're playing with confidence. They're playing with an edge. And you can attribute most of that to Chris Paul. But for the most part, this team just feels, hey, we are the number 2 seed. We're the number 2 seed for a reason. And we're not going to act like we're going to apologize for being here. We deserve this, and we're going to take full advantage.
And to follow up on that Chris Paul thought, the remarkable resilience of Chris Paul, because the shoulder injury was a big concern.
Yes, it was.
And I guarantee you, no matter what he says, no matter what's being written and comes out of that locker room, he's not 100%.
Right.
But Chris Paul is, and I sometimes hate when people use this, but he's a professional,
yes.
right? And he knows. And I think, and we talked a lot about this leading up to the handing out of the postseason awards, and in basketball, like every other professional sport, it's for what you did during the regular season.
Yes.
But what we talked about, what you highlighted a lot on this podcast was, this is what Chris Paul came to Phoenix for.
Exactly what he came for.
That swagger, that whatever he brings,
that
however you
calming
define
presence.
that. And you see these young guys who haven't been in the playoffs, some of them ever, a franchise, as you just pointed out, for the last 11 years. But Chris Paul has been.
Yes.
Chris Paul has been. Chris Paul has taken different teams there. And that's why he's here playing for the Phoenix Suns. And now, if I'm of the opinion, if you gave the MVP award as a revote, did it at the end of the postseason, depending on how this plays out for the Suns, people look at Chris Paul a lot different.
Mike, I wrote this down in my notes, and I'm going to read this verbatim because I put it down as soon as it came to my mind, and I actually texted you and Sean when this came to mind. It says, the Suns weren't believed by the NBA. Nobody believed this team, the fact that they were the number 2 overall seed in all of basketball.
Sure.
And the regular season awards showed that out.
Right.
There was no Coach of the Year. There was no MVP. You look at the Utah Jazz, a team that finished, a game or two ahead of them in the seedings. They've got the 6th man of the year. They've got defensive player of the year. And I look at it and I say those 2 awards, at least one of them should have come to the Suns.
Sure.
For what they were the year before all the way to what they've been this year, there should have been some sort of acknowledgement as to how much work they put in and how fast they turn this thing around.
And I think that's a good point, because I don't think that when you look at Salt Lake City, where the Utah Jazz play, it's not like a mecca, right? It's not some place where you're getting a lot of attention.
All they got.
I'm talking about from the national media.
Oh, I got you.
When you talk about giving the awards.
Sure.
Like, you can understand, like in years past when maybe LeBron got something because he was in Los Angeles and he was on that stage, on that platform.
Yeah.
Or Chicago or Boston,
Yep.
where you have traditional NBA cities when these awards go there. So, Salt Lake City is a lot like Phoenix in that regard, where it's kind of an afterthought with the national media in a lot of requests, in a lot of situations. Excuse me, fair, unfair. I don't necessarily buy into the East Coast bias. And the other side of it is, look, and I think we've talked about this when you came to the Cardinals, and I think there's a lot of overlap here. When you're bad for 11 years, when people don't talk about you outside of the regular season and getting ready for a draft, hopefully the ping pong ball comes up.
Right.
It's not a switch that gets flipped automatically.
No.
It doesn't happen, even with the addition of Chris Paul, even with an undefeated run in the bubble a year ago. I'm not saying it's fair, I'm not saying it's right, but that's the way things happen. And you can see it in other sports as well.
Yeah.
So I get it, but I also understand it.
It seems like it's a prove it type of situation.
Absolutely.
For the Phoenix Suns. Okay, you had a nice turnaround, but you got to prove it again.
Yeah.
If you go out and you do it again next year, you're in the same spot that you're in this year, then we will reward you with regular season awards.
Yeah.
But right now, because you came from literally nowhere and you were out of sight, out of mind for so long, we just can't give you these awards. It almost seems as if there's politics involved as far as who gets what awards, and to me it just feels wrong, because with what the Suns have done, somebody should have gotten some sort of recognition.
Completely agree. And while we're talking about the Nuggets and the Suns, I give a shout out to somebody who I've met. I'm not a friend by any stretch of the imagination, but back in the day when I was working up in Denver, I ran across him a couple times, and one of the nicest, most professional guys you'll ever meet. But he's also been a really good follow during this series, and it's Alex English, who was one of the all-time greats for the Denver Nuggets, at @AlexEnglish_2, because he wore number 2 in those. So one of the best uniforms
of
ever
all time.
in all professional
sports. The skyline
sports.
of Denver.
The Denver
Yes.
Nugget early to mid '80 unis were amazing, but
They're kind of bringing it back a little
they're a
bit.
little bit respecting their history. But man, really, just watching one of the he's soft-spoken man anyways. He's written books on poetry, right? So this is not somebody who takes to social media as a megaphone, but really thoughtful insights in terms of what the Suns have done to the Nuggets. And he's talking about how the fact, one of the posts the other night before he shut it down said something to the effect of, they got to get the MVP some help.
Yeah.
right? And so shout out to Alex English for that. But if you're inclined, follow him on Twitter. But he's right. I mean, he knows, he was on those teams back in the day that never won anything big picture, but were so exciting to watch. And he understands the team game and what, when you need to have everybody firing on the same cylinder.
And the ironic part of it is he's playing against a team that has been that exact same type of mentality. Exciting to watch, but hadn't won anything here with the Phoenix Suns. You remember in the early 2000s with Steve Nash, 2-time MVP, and get the ball in the hole before 7 seconds. You know what I mean? So less than 7. It was a lot of fun to watch, but it didn't bring anything of substance as far as championships or even the finals appearance, if you will. So I think with this team, though, it feels different, Mike. They're exciting. The fans are behind them. And big shout out to the fans that have come out and really supported because when you talk about home court advantage, I think the fans have really given the Phoenix Suns a big lift as far as that energy in the building. Every time they make a play and one big play begats another big play because they're riding that wave of momentum. And it's just a beautiful thing. It reminds me of watching those Steve Nash-led Suns a few years ago, and hopefully they can finish what those Phoenix Suns started.
One of the other things you put in the notes before we started recording was the Chris Paul situation, which I don't know, there's not going to be any resolution while they're playing basketball. But the question, we brought this up before, and I posed it in the form of a question about the owner. Mm-hmm. But Chris Paul is on a 2-year deal here, but the second year there's an option, player option.
1 year, $44.2 million, Mike.
Which there are questions as to whether or not he exercises that option.
He's already said he's declining it.
Oh, I missed that part.
He's declining it. He is declining that 1 year option. And
newsflash.
And Mike, I just got to say, as a guy who didn't make $44 million in my entire career, that is a huge step. But I think for Chris Paul, he understands his leverage right now.
Right.
With every win and every playoff series advance, his price goes up and up and up and up because his value to the Phoenix Suns goes up and up and up and up.
And which brings us back to the question that I asked the first time we brought this up prior to Chris Paul coming out and saying he wouldn't exercise the option is, do we trust that Robert Sarver will do the right thing? And again, Sean, you weigh in on this as well because you followed this team more than anybody over the years. When people look at it, when we're handing out the awards, Coach of the Year, Front Office of the Year, there's no question about what the two guys here for the Suns have done. When you give out what did the owner do right this year? Get the hell out of the way, right? And that's unfortunate.
No news is great news.
Right? That's unfortunate, because this Sun used to be owned by one of the all-time great NBA owners
Jerry Colangelo,
ever.
The best, yes.
Right? But Robert Sarver got out of the way and let his basketball people run the basketball team. And for the first time in 11 years, they are in the postseason, advanced out of the first round, and look like they're getting ready to make a big move here. But when it comes to a player that declines a $44.2 million option, the owner has to come back into the equation because coach is great, GM is great. They don't have the authority unilaterally to deal with this. The owner has to agree. And obviously, if you decline an option at 44.2, that means you got a lot more in mind.
Mike, I'm going to say this. This is one of those rare occasions where I think the player is going to be the one that calls all the shots. This is what a lot of NFL quarterbacks have been wanting, kind of like what Tom Brady has in Tampa Bay. But Chris Paul is in a very unique position to where he can dictate to a franchise, I want to stay here, but you're going to pay me more to stay here.
Right.
When you have that option, and it's a substantial option, $44.2 million is a lot of money. I don't care how you slice it. I don't care who we're talking about as far as what they already have in the bank. $44.2 million is a lot of money. But I think Chris Paul is putting himself in a position to where he can tell them, you're going to keep me. One, I want to stay here, and this is what I'm going to stay for. And I don't think Robert Sarver, I don't think Jones has any say in this. I think Chris Paul is going to be 100% in control of these negotiations. And again, there are only a few players in the history of the game that have really had this kind of leverage. But when you start talking about the results and how this team looks with him as opposed to without him, I don't think Sarver or James Jones or anybody else is going to be able to say anything to Chris Paul as far as pushback as to what his demands are.
The New York Knicks, one of their pages says this was prior to the opt-out. If he opts out, it's 3 years, in excess of 60.
Per?
It just says 3 years, 60.
I saw this one today as well. And
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, $100 million. If
Yes.
I would have read past the opening paragraph. $100 range. So 60 per.
Wow. Wow.
Will Robert Sarver open the
I don't
checkbook
think
on
he
the-
has a choice, Mike. I think when you look at, if you are the media here locally, we know all about the media here locally. I'm part of the media locally. When you start talking about if you let Chris Paul walk,
Right.
and he goes somewhere else and does exactly what he just did here, and you only got 1 year after 11 years of dying for a crack in the NBA playoffs, and
Right.
you let that guy walk out the door, forget having Devin Booker here because we love Devin Booker.
No question.
There's no shade on him.
No.
He's still going to be revered as who he is, but I'm telling you right now, he would not recover from letting Chris Paul walk, and Chris Paul would suffer a little too because then he seems like a mercenary going from team to team just trying to get a check and helping these teams get just a little bit better, but not championship level.
So we kicked this around before we started recording. When you think about it, like, who would the Suns be negotiating against if that is in fact the case? He's got ties to New York. And if you place a value post-playing career on what Chris Paul has done,
He's
to
already
me-
set up pretty good, Mike.
He,
State Farm commercials.
he is
He's good.
But in terms of where you would go to enhance something that's already in really good shape, both coasts make sense. Like, his former agent works for the Knicks.
that's what makes sense.
But his family lives in L.A.
In LA.
I understand that.
His best friend plays in L.A.
I understand, and I was going to get to LA in a minute. That's
Okay,
why I said
okay,
both coasts.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because what it is, it's a competition at that point. Like you say, all right, it's out here, right? And you don't want to be. If it's just one team that's interested in you, it's not going to go anywhere.
Sure.
So if you have a team of the stature of the Knicks
And the Lakers.
and the Lakers,
Yes.
that's a tall order to overcome. I agree with what you're saying. There's no if he does not wear a Phoenix Suns uniform next year,
Sarver will not recover. He will
can't.
not recover
You
from that.
cannot. Not only what it would mean to your fan base, but also what it would mean to those players that remain and to anybody else that might think about coming here.
And you start talking about the national perception, how it's already a struggle.
Yeah.
It would be like, oh, well, that was fun. The Chris Paul experiment only lasted 1 year in Phoenix, and now they go back to being irrelevant again.
And I if you're handicapping it, the Lakers make more sense for everything that you guys just said. I understand that, but the Knicks will be part of this. And if there is a worse owner in the NBA,
Who's actually did a lot what Sarver's done this year. He
that's
got
what
out
I'm
of the way.
saying. That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. But right now, if you did a poll of worst owners NBA, Dolan wins hands down.
He wins, but I'm telling you right now, Mike, they got the coach of the year, and they got the coach of the year for a reason. The owner got the hell out of the way and let the people who were hired to do basketball stuff, they did basketball stuff, and it worked.
And in the toughest media market in all the country, they're finally off his back for it, and it turned positive for him. At some point, there needs to be like some professional reinforcement to say, wow, look what happened here. I had postseason games in Madison Square Gardens. The media wasn't on me 24/7.
Spike Lee was back.
I let my basketball people do basketball things.
And you got the fans, the important fans back that you needed back.
Right?
Because you can't have Knick basketball without Spike Lee.
No.
I'm sorry. At this stage, there is no New York Knick basketball
Totally
without
agree.
Spike Lee in center court.
I completely agree. So this is going to be fast. It's an unfortunate but fascinating subplot to watch as the rest of the season plays out.
I mean, and the circles that know Chris Paul say that Chris Paul is all about his money. So he knows exactly what he's doing, opting out of 1 year, $44.2 million. I mean, Mike, just to say that, I mean, for a man to look at that and say, I can do better. What must that feel like?
It's like in the movies where somebody, like, they put a check on the table for $44.2 million, and he looks at it and he's like,
I can do better.
he rips it up, and you're going to have to do better than that.
It's the whole guaranteed contract thing, right? Because he looks at it like, okay, $44 million next year,
For 1 year.
or 105, 110 over the course of 2 or 3. You know what I mean? So he might on average make less, Like, say next year he doesn't make 44, but he makes 35, but he's guaranteed to make 35 or 3 more.
Yeah.
No
doubt. No
so
doubt.
the guaranteed contract changes everything.
The crazy part about this is he actually outplayed his contract.
Oh,
No
big
doubt.
time. Big time.
No doubt.
And so when you put it in that perspective, yes, people complain about the salaries of these players. I can't believe they're getting all this money. Look at the Phoenix Suns with Chris Paul and without Chris Paul. There is no doubt. It's tangible. You can feel it. It is as clear as day. They are better with him. And I'm telling you, Mike, he is in that rarefied air
No doubt.
where he
Nope.
can basically name his price, and they almost have to acquiesce.
I remember when you and I would have these conversations about contracts back in the day when we were doing the radio show.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I said it first, but I'm going to take credit for it. If he ain't taking it with a gun,
It ain't still.
more power to him.
Yeah.
Right?
And we just heard Money Mayweather say the same thing.
Right.
He's the best at
mean,
legalized stealing.
Legalized bank robbing, I think is how you put
legalized
it.
bank
Yeah.
robbing. He's like, hey, like,
You ain't taking it with a gun,
you bought it. You bought it. I told you what it is, and you bought it.
right?
So if you're Chris Paul, look,
Fascinating.
you know what it is.
If I'm Chris Paul, his,
Cash
his
rules
agent,
everything
and
around
he's
him.
like, Mr. Sarver, Mr. Dolan,
Yeah.
Miss Buss,
Yeah.
I got a conference room right here. Why
Yeah.
don't you three go in there and figure out how much I'm going to make next year?
You know what's crazy about what you just said, too, when you said he outplayed his contract? When the trade first started getting discussed, right? Like, oh, the Suns are going to pursue Chris Paul.
People were like, what?
The biggest issue was, God, but you got to pay him 44. Now you're like, I'll pay him 44. I mean, think about how
That's
well
a
he's
deal.
played.
It's
It's
a bargain.
unbelievable how well he's played this year.
If you liked him at 44, you love him at 100,
Good to be Chris Paul right about now, baby.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Good to be king. All right, that's it for the Suns angle. We'll step aside here for a minute. On the other side, we'll do a deep dive into what's going on around the rest of the National Basketball Association. Listen to Train and Grose.
B Train. Mike Grose.
Who that?
Train and Grose.
Welcome back. Train and Grose. Little snack break.
Yeah. Gotta love it.
Put out juice boxes and orange slices between segments. Got to stay hydrated in Phoenix, Arizona this time of year.
You don't
Hey,
say.
NBA playoffs. Spent the first segment doing a deep dive into the Suns as they are up early on the Denver Nuggets. Around the West, start there, and you got to start with the Dallas Mavericks, even though they're out. I mean, they had the Clippers on the ropes.
Yes, they did. Down 0-2 after 2 home games by the Clippers.
Right, and you made the point that, nobody's won on their respective home court. But they had a chance to close it out, and they had game. So it was set up. And I personally did not see the Mavericks lose in back-to-back games to fall in that series.
It was one of those where if there was a coach that could adjust to a bad start, I just look at it and it had to be Lue. I mean, it had to be Tyronn Lue.
Yeah.
It had to be because this is a guy, remember, he was down 0-2 last year.
Right.
And you think about 2016, he was down 0-2 to the Golden State Warriors. And they won in 7 when he was the head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers. So this is familiar territory for Tyronn Lue as the head coach of a basketball team. He is one of the best in recent history at coming out of 0-2 holes and winning 4 out of 5. Because that in itself sounds so daunting of a task. When you start talking about playoffs and you're playing good teams and you've played them twice already and you're going to play them 7 times in a 2-week span, you would think that the team that got off to the great start could finish that deal when you've only got to win 2 out of 5. But
right.
Give credit to Tyronn Lue. He's figured out a way to dig out of holes, and now he's got himself in a similar
just gonna
situation here against a Utah Jazz team that is a little bit better competition, I would say, than the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, a more complete team is probably the fair way to put it.
My goodness.
And as you said, they find themselves down 2-0, both those games in Salt Lake City. And you're right. I mean, you look at the Jazz quietly getting it done. Like, they're, at least from where I sit, they're not getting, as the number 1 seed, they're not getting much of a headline, if you will. Obviously, we sit here in this town, and so the Suns are dominant in all the media coverage. But even nationally, it doesn't feel like the Jazz are getting a whole lot of attention. And real quickly, before we go back to the other thing is, remember, kids, they call it gambling because when the playoffs started, I think I brought up the point, and I get emails from people that have been on the show before where they list the odds and that sort of thing.
Yep.
And neither the Suns nor the Jazz were favored to get to the Western Conference Finals.
And that looks like they're on a collision course.
That's why they call it gambling.
And the thing about it is, for one, we've got to start with putting respect on Donovan Mitchell's name. He is a superstar. Superstar. Not just a star in the league, a superstar. He is the best player on the number 1 overall seed. To me, that has MVP written all over it. But I think because of the missed games and the way that people perceive the Utah Jazz being who they are, he just didn't get the proper recognition that he deserved. But, Mike, you look at his last 2 postseasons. When they had that first-round loss last year to the Denver Nuggets, the man scored 57 in a loss.
Yep.
He scored 51 points in another game. And you look at his average thus far in this series, it's 42 points a game.
Yeah.
Mike, he's absolutely on another level. And he's got a Dwayne Wade, who's partial owner, who is giving him all the toolage. And oh, by the way, I wonder who his game looks like while he's going out there looking like a mini Flash.
If you look at both these series sit 2-0, with the Jazz up 2-0 over the Clippers, Suns up 2-0 over the Nuggets. And if you look at this, the Suns have won by 17 and 25 respectively in their first 2 games.
Yep.
And then
Should have been, and not even that close.
Not even. And then the Jazz won by 3 and by 6.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, who does that benefit? Because part of it is, let's put the cart ahead of the horse. Let's say the Suns and the Jazz both advance.
It's going to be tight games.
Right, it's going to be tight games.
Not going to be blowouts.
But on the other hand, like the Suns, and I'm not saying they coast, but, the intensity level, once you get up 20-plus points, 25 points, 30 points, like you watched it, and if you missed it, the Denver coach told you his guys quit.
They quit.
Right? So the intensity level kind of pulls back a little bit. So there's got to be a little bit of benefit to that, in terms of getting through without whatever a tight series entails. But then the mental side of, hey, we won 3-point games against the Clippers. It's a 6-point game against Clippers, and they had those in their opening round as well. So I'm wondering where the benefit falls if these continue to play out the way they are.
Here comes the question, Mike. Who is the better team, the Utah Jazz at their best or the Phoenix Suns at their best? Who's the better team? And you can say, well, it's the Utah Jazz. They're the number 1 overall seed. They did it better longer because they had the number 1 overall seed. Yeah. They're the number 1 seed for a reason.
Yeah.
But you think about the Phoenix Suns, it's almost to their advantage that they hadn't been there before because they don't know what pressure feels like. They hadn't been in those pressurized situations. So I think for them, they're going to go out and they're going to play free and they're going to play loose because the way that they've played, Mike, it's been beneficial. They've won going away. I mean, they handled the Los Angeles Lakers. They're handling the Denver Nuggets thus far right now. So why wouldn't they think that they can go into Utah and do the same things? Because they were underdogs in both those series. And now if they get to the conference finals and find themselves having to go to Salt Lake City for 2 games, I don't think they bat an eye because they're like, hey, this is what we've been all year. This is what people have thought about us. This is how we've written them. We've proved them wrong, and we're going to prove them wrong yet again, especially with the floor general like Chris Paul leading the way.
No, absolutely. And meanwhile, in the East, I guess I got to eat a little crow here because when we knew the matchups, and I said, look, nice Job, Atlanta, taking care of the Knicks. But the Sixers ain't the Knicks.
Right. Yeah.
Couldn't have been more wrong.
First game out. By the way.
Oh, by the way.
Yeah.
Hello, Atlanta. And that was national TV. That was Sunday afternoon.
Hello, Trae Young.
That series got started, and the Hawks went up to Philly, and Trae Young, if he hadn't had it already, had his coming out party. If you look at ESPN.com right now, the picture not on the basketball page, the picture on the front of ESPN.com is one Trae Young walking into the arena, asking the question about, is this his coming out party? And I think emphatically the answer is yes.
Mike, at some point we're going to have to look at Doc Rivers, and I love Doc Rivers, and you have to start looking at him at face value. Yes, he won a championship with the Boston Celtics. He got to another finals and lost to the Los Angeles Lakers. But when you look at recent history in Doc Rivers, nobody has done less with more with teams. And to think you got a Joel Embiid, to think you got a Ben Simmons, there's so much talent on this team, and for them to be in this situation where they've already split and the Atlanta Hawks in game 1 stole home court advantage, I don't see them going to Atlanta and winning both those games. I don't know if they win a game in Atlanta, because this seems to be one of the most front-running teams that I've seen in a long time. When things are good, Joel Embiid is talking smack. He's talking to the crowd. He's gyrating on the floor. He's doing all these different things. But when they're losing, Mike, it is, okay, he can't be found. There's an APB out for Joel Embiid. And then Ben Simmons, my goodness, the man had, 6 points in the last game? You're supposed to be a superstar. You're supposed to be at least a Robin to Joel Embiid's Batman. And right now, you may be egghead at best when we start talking about your roles as far as what you play on a team. And I think for Doc Rivers, if they don't win this series, if they even go to 7 and it looks like a close game 7 where they squeak out one at home, I think people are going to start to turn on Doc Rivers and look at him and be like, I don't know about you being a long-term solution in Philadelphia.
I think that absolutely happens if you don't get out of this round. And then what happens in the next round, I think you have to wait and see how that plays out. But you're right. You do what they did it matters when you're on national TV.
Yes, it does.
It matters when you're on ABC.
Absolutely matters on
because
ABC.
I made the comment earlier, when the Suns drew the Lakers in the opening round, and that was great. We know how that one played out. But I said, look, if you would have gotten Portland in the opening round, you remember how they played at noon?
NBA TV.
Right, noon on Sunday against the Lakers. It would have been 8:30 TNT against the Blazers. But with great opportunity comes an opportunity. You got to take advantage of it.
No doubt.
And the 76ers did not do that. If it's the coach, if it's the players, if it's a combination thereof. But I think you have to wait until this series is over, because if you go in and you play Brooklyn, and you don't advance against Brooklyn, but you represent well, I think you can kind of change that narrative. I think. I mean, because we talked about this at the start of the playoffs: Sixers, Bucks, Nets. Not necessarily in that order, but those are the 3 best in the East.
Mike, the Nets are toying with the Bucks right now.
Understood, but before the playoffs started, when we saw them lined up,
based on what we saw, yes,
because it was not nearly as wide open as we thought the West was when it started.
Correct.
That's all I'm saying. So if at some level that narrative hasn't changed, because the Nets have been all that and more. What's Manouche say? All that in a bag of chips.
Yeah.
Right.
It's scary, and they've done most of this without James Harden.
Right. But if you're the Sixers and you get past Atlanta and you play, not even beat, but you represent well in a 6 or 7 game series against the Net, I think you can change that narrative.
Mike, it ain't going 7. Whoever plays the Nets is not going 7 in the Eastern Conference.
That's why I said if. I mean, obviously.
If was a 5th, we'd all be drunk.
But you're absolutely right. If we come away from this and you lose the opening game on national TV, you drop 2 more in Atlanta, then you got to talk about it. I think that's entirely fair.
Mike, I think this is probably the game of the season for Philadelphia. They have got to win this game, because if you don't win game 3, you're not winning game 4. I don't care how angry you are. I don't care what determination, what focus you have. You're not beating that team in that stadium if you don't win this first one. Your best shot is the first game. I'm just telling you.
Yeah, you don't need to pipe in the Nuggets coach into the Sixers locker room to fire him up a little bit.
No.
Bunch of quitters.
Yeah, no, but they didn't quit. They just got beat.
They got beat. No, I know. I'm just anyways, Nets, Bucks.
Oh.
Bucks are a good basketball team.
Mike, they've got the reigning 2-time, well, he was the reigning 2-time MVP and Defensive Player of the Year.
And they got a better supporting cast this year.
And it looks like it's not enough, because the Nets look better in every statistical category. 3-point shooting, regular 2-point shooting, free throws. I mean, the list goes on. And don't even get me started about Giannis Antetokounmpo and his free throw struggles. I mean, it looks like me out there trying to shoot free throws. I've never seen a guy with that much talent and that heralded as far as a player struggle so much in one area. Mike, he can't shoot a free throw. It's free. There is nobody giving him any kind of resistance. When you're at home, they're even quiet for you, and he still can't make free throws. I think he was like 2 of 7 last night, and they eked out a win where they held them to, 83 points?
86-83, and that's what I was just going to say. That's the only chance they have, is if they go back to almost like that pre-shot clock type of basketball.
But that was just bad shooting by the.
I understand
by
that.
The Nets.
I understand that, but bad shooting and the tempo.
Yeah.
Right, and you have to hope you get that again.
You got to ugly it up
3 more times.
That's your only shot.
That's my point. You got to go back to 80s basketball if you're the Milwaukee Bucks.
So do you think Kevin Durant is going to shoot?
No.
11 for 28 again?
No.
Kyrie Irving's going to shoot 8-9 for.
Even though I was trying to make a point, so that's why I shut you down a little bit about the Nets. You're right.
They're just a better team.
We're just waiting.
We're just waiting.
Yeah. And to your point, they can afford to take it easy with James Harden.
Mike, Kevin Durant, I've always been a fan of Kevin Durant. I don't like sometimes his sensitivity when you go social media and some of the antics on social media. But when you start talking about just from a basketball standpoint,
right.
Mike, he is as unguardable a player as I've ever seen. And that goes even with the great Michael Jordan. I mean, I know it almost seems blasphemous to put somebody in that level, but watching Kevin Durant play basketball, it's almost like making toast or ice. It's like the easiest thing in the world. I mean, he can crawl out of bed and get you 25. Just by thinking about basketball, he can get you 25.
But your sensitivity comment is interesting. Did you see him the other night with TNT?
No.
He did a post-game interview with Jared Greenberg on TNT.
It's a waste of time.
And Jared Greenberg asked a question about, like, I don't know, your how you've rebounded to come. Were you surprised that you came back as strong as you did? Something like that.
Yeah.
For me, and I think one of the hardest jobs in media is being on the floor during a game where you got to talk to a player, you got to listen to your producer, you got somebody over there yelling at you to get over here, and so you got to come up with a question on the fly.
Sure. And
Kevin Durant hits him with the, "Is that a real question?"
I mean, Mike, one of the more sensitive athletes I've seen in a long time. He's up there with Cam Newton and a few other guys. I mean, just literally does not handle the media very well at all. But it is still a joy to watch the man play
on
basketball.
the court, yeah. It's almost like the Nets media relations, just like give him somebody else. Like don't put the reporter in that spot and don't put Kevin Durant in that spot.
Because he's going to do it to you every time. Like He is going to muck it up. And I just think for the social or for the broadcasters out there, he's the story. If it's good, he's the story. If it's bad, he's the story. But you can't ask him those questions because the answer is probably not going to be anything that you can go with.
Here was the context. Jared Greenberg says, following your Achilles injury, did you ever think you'd return to this form?
Okay, but that's a bad question.
It was not phrased very well. And to my point about, again, not giving everybody cover, and Kevin Durant said, "Is that a real question?" Of course. What do you want me to say to that?
I got to side with Kevin on that one.
Yeah.
I got to go with Kevin on that one because that's a bad question.
It is a bad question, and I don't know if the question was bad, it was, or the response was worse when he tried to follow up, because then he just got almost into pander mode. Like, it's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to offend you," type of thing. Like, sometimes you make a mistake, move on. Like, and understanding who you are.
Isn't he the same guy, though, who asked Devin Booker post-game in one of the Lakers series games about when he was getting double-teamed and complaining about it in the preseason? And Booker was a little bit nicer with his response, but it was very similar.
In L.A., when they were in L.A. doing
was that Jared Greenberg too?
Yeah, and he was like, "Hey, you're getting doubled so much in this series, but you're handling it well. Does that go back to when you were, on that video complaining about it in the preseason?" Which is a dumb question as well. So he's starting to have a track record of those.
And he's been around for a long time too, so it's kind of surprising. And that, like when you played, like you knew.
I was asked those type of questions coming back from injuries.
And but you knew who the media, like you have an idea when you come out and they whoever, like Cardinals PR says, "Hey, Fox TV wants to talk to you post game," or Cardinals Radio Network. You know who it, like if
know who they are.
And you know kind of what to expect from the questions.
That's right, but not that though.
Right?
Not that question.
What was the most ridiculous question you got asked coming off an injury?
Did you feel like you could ever get back to your form? And I answered the same way Kevin Durant answered.
Is that a real question?
Is that a real question?
Was that local? Was that local or national?
It was local, yeah. Because Mike, no athlete ever thinks that they're going to be a diminished form of themselves. Why do you think it's so hard to see guys go out there and play at an advanced age? Because they still think that they can do it the way that they did when they were 20-something.
Right.
And they're not. And we're the most delusional people on earth. Like, we have this false sense of security that if we just go and we practice and do the things that we've done all our career, then we're going to get certain results. You forget about father time. You forget about attrition. You forget about your body becoming as old as other people's bodies. And it is what it is.
Local media asked you that question, though?
Yeah, they asked me, Mike, because I think it was my tricep injury, and they asked me, well, can you come back and be the same guy? I was like, look, my legs are still the same.
Right.
My mind is still the same, and I mean that is just a tendon. That's not like it wasn't a bone or something that broke.
Yeah. I just, for me, like if it's national guys that like Jared Greenberg that dip in and dip out, they're flying city to city and maybe don't have that rapport built up. Not excusing stupid questions, but you build up rapport with local guys, I would think, more than you do national. But,
but Mike, that's not a question that you had to come up on the fly. He thought about that question.
Understood.
That had nothing to do with the flow of the game. That had nothing to do with what was going on in the game. That's one of those he had in his back pocket on the flight there. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to hit him with that one. If I get in a tight spot, I'm going to ask this.
Okay.
And it's a bad question.
All right. Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. On the other side, college football in the news in June.
Yeah.
Is it good? We'll discuss it next. Train and Grose.
Train and Grose.
I'll take things I never thought I'd hear Sean Crespin say for 100, please, Alex.
If we could only record what we say off the air. Oh, wait.
The problem is you and I aren't recording it. If I would have said it, that'd be out on the internet already.
Oh yeah, you'd be promoted for the show.
Oh my God.
My boss at the day job would be like, we said we were okay with the little side gig, but
I was talking about pretzels.
Yeah. We just
Sure
talking
you
about
were.
pretzels. Mm-hmm. Not a game. We're talking about pretzels.
Which makes me think when you said you were talking about pretzels. I don't know if you guys saw this last year, like everybody figuring out the pandemic and people doing like Zoom calls from home and everything. You guys know who Jeffrey Toobin is on CNN?
No.
He did something stupid on Zoom, right? I don't know the story.
So he was on a Zoom, not at CNN, but he's a reporter or writer for a magazine, and they were having a staff meeting or something. My man's on a Zoom call with no pants on.
Wow.
Acting inappropriately.
Wow.
On a work Zoom call. And they fired him. And they're like, you're gone.
Rightfully
with
so.
no tolerance.
Rightfully
Absolutely. CNN put him back on the air.
No.
And had a female, one of their hosts, like interviewing him about like,
Hold up.
saying, hey,
Wait.
glad you gave me a second chance here. Like I so you can say things. I say them out of context. I believe yours was perfectly in context, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Wow.
There's video evidence of what my man was up to.
Yeah.
Me talking about pretzels reminded you of that?
Yeah.
All right.
Wow.
Because it was context. I just said context.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can make it sound like whatever I want now.
There you go.
Because there's no video proof.
College football.
College football is in the news in June.
Back to the show.
I don't know what you didn't make me think of that. It's just second chances, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
College football expanding the playoffs.
Yep.
They skipped right past 8.
8 was my number. And you remember we argued 8 when we were on the show back in 2012.
Right.
We talked about, I thought 8 was the perfect number because you got to include all 5 conference champions. Mm-hmm. But they've gone, well, I'll let you do your job.
No, they went past 8 and landed on 12.
I don't get 12, Mike. I really don't. I like 8. 8 made a lot of sense because, again, you could get the 5 conference champions in and you get 3 wild cards.
Right.
To me, you don't need any more than that.
Right.
It's a nice even number. You can have 2 different sides of the bracket. Both tops get the number 1 seed, number 2 get a bye. It makes all the sense in the world. But when you start talking about 8, it starts getting a little tricky because now you're starting to acquiesce to a lot of these smaller schools that have been crying foul for a long time about they don't get a seat at the table.
Absolutely.
And you talk about the Pac-12, their commissioner came out recently and said during these negotiations, it sucks not being at the table. And now it's almost that again, Mike, that everybody gets a trophy. Everybody gets included. To some degree, yeah, you get included, but what you did during the regular season matters. And if you didn't do enough to get included, you don't get a seat at the table when it's all said and done.
Right. Look, the reason, and I think people lose sight of this sometimes, what and why they might have landed on the number they landed on is because college football, the postseason in 1A football is not dictated by the NCAA. It's not administered by NCAA. Doesn't have anything to do with the bowl games or anything like that.
Yes.
And so the college football programs are beholden to money, and the bowl games by which they can play the game.
Follow the money.
Right? So that's how you land on 12. I will wait until they send out their final report. This is just like, hey, they haven't approved it yet. They're working on it. But that's what I will bet a paycheck on is the combination of bowl games and TV partners said this is the best way to do this. To your point, well, 8, well, geez, if we go a little bit further, we can take care of this bowl game and that bowl game, and ESPN's happy, and then CBS is happy. That's why they did what they did.
I got a few thoughts on this, Mike, and just stay with me for a second. I truly believe that going to 12, this is going to hurt Alabama and Clemson and Georgia and Ohio State. It's going to hurt them because now they're not going to have a stranglehold on recruiting like they've had. When you start talking about players that come out of high school and they're All-Americans and 5-star, they want to go to places where they have a chance to play in the playoffs. Well, you think about the last couple of years, if you weren't LSU, you weren't Clemson, you weren't Alabama, you weren't Ohio State, you weren't even thought of in the playoff picture.
That's a fair point.
So now you've got 12 teams that are in the playoff picture. Now those teams that weren't necessarily like the Oregons or the USCs and the Notre Dames and the Michigans, now they can actually go into a kid's house and tell their parents face to face, hey, listen, I'm going to make your son a man, and he's going to have an opportunity to play for a national championship because they can be 1 of 12. If it's 1 of 4, everybody's going to Alabama or Clemson. If it's 1 of 12, now you start to dilute that recruiting bet a little bit, and now the teams like Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State don't get all of the best players.
So somebody took the proposed format, and obviously we talk a lot about the Pac-12 here, and they went back the last couple of years, and what would the proposed format meant under what happened in each of those seasons. And I'm going to run back just a handful of seasons. 2019, 2 teams would have been in it, 6 and 11, Oregon and Utah. 2018, even with all that, it only been 1 still for the Pac-12. Washington only at 9. 2017, 8 USC, 11 Washington. The best they would have fared was 2016 with Washington, USC, and Colorado all in. 2015, again, a single. And then the last year that they looked at was 2014. It would have been Oregon and Arizona in the postseason.
Sure.
So you can see under that format just exactly what you're saying, because the Pac-12 has kind of become
an afterthought.
All right, that's a better word than I was going to come up with in terms of the current format. And it's really not even a conference thing, to your point. It is because Alabama comes out of the SEC or Clemson, the ACC, or Ohio State, the Big Ten. But it's been those 3 programs, for the most part, that have dominated the landscape in a 4-team playoff.
Yes.
Right? And so you were really, if you were lucky, you were Georgia, you were LSU, you were somebody else that maybe could slide into that 4th spot.
Yeah.
And now with this other format, you can include those 12 teams. You can put it on a more national scale in terms of where you play these games.
Yep.
And you bottom line, you make a lot more money.
Mike, this is a referendum also on my alma mater, Notre Dame, because in the last couple of years, Notre Dame has got a seat at the table because of the fact that they're Notre Dame.
Right.
And now that you open it to 12, now they don't get a spot in the top 4 just by being Notre Dame. Now you've got to earn it, because the last couple of times we've seen my alma mater in the playoffs, it's been annihilation.
Yeah.
They haven't deserved to be on the field. It pains me to say that about my alma mater, but it's just the truth. The SEC has and Clemson has routinely made a mockery of my alma mater, and now they can still get in the playoffs, but now they're going to have to be a 10 or 11 seed, and they're going to have to work their way through to get to that Final Four and not automatically be put in because they bring such great ratings and they bring such money and all that stuff to college football. Now they're forced to have to go and earn it, Mike.
What will it take, if anything? Because this is at Notre Dame.
They're never joining the conference.
So that's the question. This is
never.
Solely a football conversation because they're all in ACC, everything else.
Every other sport.
Notre Dame baseball. They won the ACC.
ACC.
Go figure. Notre Dame baseball wins the ACC.
How about that?
College baseball powers live in the ACC. Notre Dame wins. So
how about that?
and when we talk about football, it's not history, it's not tradition, it's the NBC contract.
It's money. Mike, always follow the money,
it's
man.
the NBC contract is
They
the
don't
reason
want to
why.
share.
Notre Dame will tell you it's our history, it's our tradition, it's our legacy, but it's NBC money.
Mike,
Because they're not, to your point.
Yes. It took a global pandemic for us to begrudgingly join the ACC because they had no choice. If there were enough teams that they could have played the schedule that they always played and gone all over the country and played other teams, they would have done it. But because it became such a conference-only type of situation, they had to join the ACC that year. And otherwise, I'm telling you, they would give up Catholicism before they give up their independence. I'm just telling you, Mike, that's how money hungry my alma mater is. And it pains me to say it, but that's just the bare truth.
So let me rephrase what you just said and tell me I'm wrong. They would give up their Catholicism before they gave up their NBC money.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's the same thing, right?
This is the exact same
because
thing.
they could do it. They could.
It makes so much sense to join the conference.
They could join the ACC as a full-fledged member and still play USC every year.
Mike,
still play Stanford if that's who they want, whoever they want to play.
It would make more sense to join the Big Ten. From a geographical standpoint, you're right there.
Absolutely.
Indiana and Illinois and Purdue, they're all in the same state, for goodness.
And you still play USC.
You can still play them. But I'm telling you, they're not giving up that independence because it's too lucrative for my alma mater. And I have to call it, I have to say it how it is, Mike.
Right.
My team, this playoff format is going to level the playing field for recruiting. It's going to include all 5 conferences because the top 4 conferences that finished in the voting are going to get buys. So good for them. And then you start talking about, my alma mater. They're going to have to earn it now. You can't just get that automatic 4th spot just because you're Notre Dame and you're good for college football when they're good.
There you go. We'll keep an eye on it, and once they officially approve it, break it down even more. But it looks like college football is going to expand this postseason format that they have. One
more thought about it. I think if you're the SEC, I think you're laughing all the way to the bank.
Oh, yeah, you are.
Because if you're the SEC, you don't have to win your conference championship to get in now. You could be A&M, and you can have one loss to Alabama, and you can still get in the playoffs. And at the end of the season, they were playing as well as anybody. So it's not now you have to win your conference championship to get in. Now the LSUs, the Georgias, the Texas A&Ms, Mike, they may have 4 or 5 teams in the top 12. Just think about that for a second.
Yeah.
If you have the top 5 conferences, the conference champions, okay, they're in. But then you got 7 at-larges. You don't think the majority of those at-larges aren't going to come from the SEC the way things are shook up right now?
Well, and I just read it off. There was one year that the Pac-12 would have gotten 3, so it would be possible, to your point, for getting multiple. But whatever that rating system is, it will reward strength of schedule because there's other situations here that we pointed out the Pac-12 would have only gotten 1 in. And I think what you can say about the Pac-12, you can also say about the Big 12.
Yes.
And I think you could probably, to a certain degree, say about the Big 10 as well. You look at it, there is undeniably, as much as you might hate to say it, there is a drop-off.
From the top to the bottom, yes.
Everybody hates the SEC unless you're a fan of the SEC.
Or you attend the SEC.
Right.
Yeah, so Mike, listen, you can't tell me every year that a Georgia and an LSU, an Auburn every now and again, those teams are just better than the other teams around the country.
And that's the argument, right? You pull whoever the second place team is behind Alabama, because that's always the conversation. Who's number 2 behind Alabama? Pull that team out. Pull Georgia, number 2 team, out and drop them in the Big 12. What happens? Pull Georgia out or LSU out.
Florida last year.
Pull Florida out and put Florida in the Pac-12 for a year.
They're going to run it. They're going to win it.
Fascinating. We'll follow it. We'll break it down. We'll keep an eye on the Irish, too. You're listening to Training Gross. Guess what's coming up next?
Pump the brakes.
And dad jokes.
Yeah, baby.
We'll be right back on Training Gross. Welcome back in. I always say this, it's just a lead up, it's just an appetizer. Everything we do for the first 3 segments brings us to the final segment of the podcast where we deliver Pump the Brakes.
Yeah.
And then you finish things off with the dad joke of the week.
Dad jokes rule.
You crack yourself up on dad jokes.
He was laughing before the show started and just said, "Oh, I know what I got for dad jokes." So I can't wait. I can't wait. We'll see what we're gonna get.
And unlike Pump the Brakes, this is a solo venture.
Yeah, we don't know we have no idea what's coming.
You don't have a research staff working on this. You don't tell your
baby.
You don't tell your interns to go out and find the best possible dad joke for next week's show.
There's no I in team, but there's an ME in that mother.
There we go. All right, Sean Cressman, what do you got for us?
All right, we're going to start with something straightforward with the Phoenix Suns. We're going to end with something gross at restaurants, all right? So that's the spectrum today. Very simple, straightforward. Pump the brakes or not, the Phoenix Suns are the best team left in the Western Conference.
Pump the brakes. They were a number 2 seed, and there is a number 1 seed that is still in the playoffs. And until somebody knocks out the Utah Jazz, I have to give them their just due. Just like the Suns are fighting for their respect this year in the NBA, the Utah Jazz are along those same lines. And we talked about it at the beginning of the show. Donovan Mitchell is a superstar. He is a legitimate top 5 player in all the NBA now. He has played his way into that conversation, and you cannot deny him, because when the lights have been the brightest the last couple years when it comes to playoffs, nobody has shined brighter than Donovan Mitchell. He's got 2 50-point performances under his belt in the bubble. One was in a loss. He's got 2 40-point. They're 6-0 since he's come back from injury in the playoffs this year for the Utah Jazz. You can't get better than 6-0. So the fact that this team doesn't lose, they're the number 1 seed, they've got the defensive player of the year, they've got the 6th man of the year, and they still can't carry Donovan Mitchell's jock. I gotta say, they are the best team in the West until it gets settled on the court.
What's our pump the brake sound effect for riding the brake pedal on the freeway? You know, that person that's in front of you.
Hold up.
I can't do that.
Yeah,
No, I mean, that's what it is. Hold up.
hold up.
You know, we're not stomping on the brakes. We're just saying, okay,
Hold
all right.
up.
Because everything that B-Train said about the Utah Jazz is correct. Everything is correct.
Yeah.
But when you watch the postseason to date,
Last 4 games.
has there been any team more impressive in what they've done than the Phoenix Suns?
No.
Just, I'm talking body of work.
Last 4 games. Go ahead.
But you gotta also give it context, though. There was no Anthony Davis in one of those games.
Sure.
There's been no Jamal Murray in the 2 games against the Denver Nuggets. They're arguably second best player on the team. I know his teammate just won MVP. I don't think he wins MVP if Jamal Murray plays this year.
Yeah,
So-
but I mean, I can give that context to the Jazz.
But the Jazz have beat healthy teams. They've handled healthy teams thus far.
Well, let me throw this out there, though. Is there something to, and you of all people would know this, a team playing their best blank, so in your case football, when it matters most? That run you guys went on, you hit your stride at the perfect time. Does it feel like this Phoenix Suns team's doing the same thing?
Yes. And they've got to play that style in order to beat the Utah Jazz. If
There you
you
go.
get to that. And we talked about this. Jazz at their best, Suns at their best. Who's the better team?
There we go. For that reason, I am not pumping the brakes.
All right, this next one's kind of, just bear with me. It's kind of long, all right? Chris Paul is the first player with 15 points, 15 assists, and 0 turnovers
3
in a
times.
playoff game. He's the first one to do it since Chris Paul in 2014. And in 2014, he was the first one to do it since Chris Paul in 2008. The man finished 5th in MVP race this year. 49 voters didn't even have him in their top 5. So pump the brakes or not, Chris Paul is the most underappreciated player in all of the major 4 sports.
No, pump the brakes.
Who is?
It's not that he's not underappreciated. He just doesn't have the stats that wow you. His effect is tangible. But
You got to watch the games to see it.
You got to watch the games, but if you were to look at his stat line, the stat lines aren't going to just wow you. He's not going to have a 40-point, 15 assist game like a James Harden. He's not going to have a 30-point, 20 rebounds, 10 steals type of game. He's gonna dictate the pace of the game. He's gonna get people in position, and he's gonna have some assists. But the stats just don't wow you. And I think having Devin Booker on the team actually hurt his MVP case as much as anything.
I'd agree with that, Grose.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Like, I don't think that's true. And what makes Chris Paul so valuable are those intangibles. And we talked a little bit about this earlier. You know, and I think that if you re-voted or awarded the MVP based on the postseason, the number or the vote totals would look a lot different. Because again, you get that singular attention when you're playing the games the way they do in the postseason, and you can see the Chris Paul effect on full display in these games. And again, to Bertrand's point, it doesn't show up in points per game, assists per game. I mean, that no turnovers, that's a remarkable stat.
He's done it 3 times. It's only been done 4 other times in the history of the game.
It's a remarkable stat.
So as we're recording this, we're about an hour and a half away from Game 3 starting. But as right now, as we record this, the man has a assist to turnover ratio of 26-1.
Yes.
26-1.
I got an answer.
Unbelievable.
I got an answer for your question. Most underappreciated. I'm gonna go Mike Trout.
I agree with that.
Mike Trout could be one of the best baseball players we've ever seen. But the fact that he doesn't say anything, there's no outside the game personality.
Yeah.
And you've got a Shohei Ohtani on his team now that's taken a lot of the attention because of the fact that he's a two-way player. He pitches and he hits home runs and he hits for power.
Yeah. And the era that he plays in, right? Like if Trout played in the 80s when baseball used to be able to turn out personalities and turn out superstars, it might be a different story. But
he plays on a team that's underperforming.
Historically underperformed.
You bring, to your point, you get him help. You got Albert Pujols showed up.
He's with the Dodgers now.
He's with the Dodgers, and that's the other thing. You play in the shadow of the Dodgers.
Yeah, I just think there aren't very many 5-tool guys left. Mike Trout is definitely a 5-tool guy.
No doubt.
And the fact that he doesn't get a lot, I mean, even nationally, they don't know they don't ever talk about him because.
And he's not out there. Chris Paul does the State Farm commercial. What does Mike Trout do?
Nothing. He goes home.
Plays baseball.
He goes up, shows up, goes to work, and goes home.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is.
Just a lot of disrespect being thrown Chris Paul's way. Not by you guys.
No.
Not by you guys. But if 49 voters did not have him in the top 5, that's ludicrous.
Yeah, that is ludicrous.
That's ludicrous. Kyler Murray had a press conference after being on the cover of Sports Illustrated this week, and he talked about running the football as much as he did last year. Here's a quote from him. He said, quote, honestly, the way I see it, my legs should be a luxury, and it kind of wasn't like that last year. Pump the brakes or not, if Kyler Murray leads the Cardinals in rushing again, they'll be watching the postseason again.
Oh, I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. I mean, I think they're going to be watching the playoffs anyway.
I agree.
But you cannot continue to put a guy that size in harm's way running the football because somebody is going to catch him off, and they're going to catch him when he's not looking.
Yeah.
And when they catch that guy, because he's not the biggest person in the world. When he came into the league, everybody talked about those 2 inches. And it's something about men and inches. Anyway, when you start talking about, how big he is and how much he can take, there's only so many hits in that body, that miniature body of Kyler Murray.
And we saw that last year. He admitted it, that he wasn't right? He was banged up, the shoulder, and it should be a wake-up call to that coaching staff.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Well, and he said that
and
too.
I didn't pump the brakes, by the way. I agree.
Yeah.
They got to figure it out.
I grabbed just a small clip from that quote. He said that too, Grose, that last year when he had the banged up shoulder and then he couldn't utilize his legs like he wanted is when they started losing football games and they were one-dimensional. And he said those exact words. Hopefully it's a learning lesson for us. So we'll see going forward.
And the us is not me.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, exactly. Quote, I did not request a trade. I've always wanted to play here. The real reality is that I'm here, and I'm here to win, and I'm here to win it all.
I know who this is.
Russell Wilson is full of...
Hold up.
Pump the brakes or not.
Yeah, pump the brakes. He definitely is full of it. Not only did he say he didn't want to be there, he had a list.
And his agent put it out there.
So that agent's not doing anything that Russell Wilson didn't approve of and sign off for. So the fact that he's trying to make a bad situation good now, or at the very least an awkward situation good now, he's doing what he's got to do. It's damage control.
Yep.
And you still haven't heard him say "Go Hawks." You know, he used to be infamous for saying "Go Hawks" after every interview. So he still doesn't feel quite invested like he used to feel. And he's a guy that kind of feels like, yeah, he kind of got punked a little bit, and he's making good because he doesn't want to ruin his rep, but he ain't feeling the Seahawks like he once did.
And that's his MO, isn't it? When you look at Russell Wilson, he's like, there's no denying what he did on the field, but there's just something about him. I don't.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
I don't know. I just get the feel for
he seems like a super nice dude. I've never met the man, but he seems like an awesome dude.
Seems like there's like a split personality. Like there's a public Russell Wilson, and then there's a behind the scenes Russell
Probably.
Wilson.
It's kind of that to me. It's a little bit not all the way, but a little bit that Eddie Haskell. Like the out there, he's going to tell you what he wants to hear, but behind the scenes, to the point, whatever he asked for, didn't ask for.
Right.
Again, back to the radio show you and I did. Agent works for the player.
Yeah.
So I don't think you have very many examples you can point to in professional sports where an agent goes out there and does something that the player isn't aware of and more than likely approved of.
That list was too specific, Mike. Those teams were too specific. Cowboys, Bears,
Raiders were on there.
He thought that through. He actually was pissed that he didn't have the Tom Brady treatment.
Right.
And when they pushed back and they looked him in the face like, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
He had no comeback. And so the fact that he's under contract, he had to basically swallow his pride and come back and say, hey, it is what it is. I'm happy to be here. We're going to win. But I'm telling you, the fact that you didn't hear that "Go Hawks" at the end of those interviews.
That's a good catch.
Everything is not all good in Seattle.
I didn't see that, but
that's
a really good point. It's going to be interesting to see because everybody else around the Seahawks, particularly the Rams and the 49ers, have kind of raised the bar.
Yeah.
And what's the impact going to be on that team that's kind of had their way with the NFC West for the most part, for the better part of his career, Russell Wilson's career?
Man, it's going to be tough. And
you guys want to do some extra?
Go ahead. Let's do it.
I mean, we can't get out of here without talking about Julio Jones, right? With the trade that went down, he's now with Tennessee. So pump the brakes or not, the Julio Jones trade to Tennessee does not change the landscape of the AFC at all.
I agree with that. Because the formula for success for the Tennessee Titans is to run the football. It starts with Derrick Henry.
And they already had the ability with the play action with Brown, right?
I mean, one is good, two is better. I mean,
True.
I get that.
True, but still.
Yeah, but I still don't think that they're going to become a run and gun type of team. They're not going to put the ball up 80 more times or 30 more times a game because you brought in Julio Jones. The days of him with 1,600 yards and 100 catches, those days are over just by the design of the offense in Tennessee. Not to say that he won't be an asset because he's going to take a player out of the box.
Absolutely.
Which gives Derrick Henry more room to run.
Right.
But they're not going to put the ball in his hands that much more to allow him to be the Julio Jones we've known and loved in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think you look at it and Tennessee is incrementally better because of the addition. But I keep going back to what we talked about last week. If you want to have a landscape shifting move, I still go back to Baltimore. I go back to...
Oh, he would have been perfect. He would have been perfect.
And it's something you said about the Cardinals. Like, at some point, you got to do something different than you used to do.
Pull the damn trigger.
And the Ravens' MO is to do it this way and do it this way every time. And we're not going to... Sometimes don't you got to break the bank?
Yeah.
You know, and so if you...
The Ravens have done that in the past. They've taken chances on guys.
Why didn't they do it this time?
I think the price was too high. I think the asking price was just out of their league.
It wound up being a second and I think a third and a fourth down the road. But you do got to pay the man, though. You have to work in the contract.
There is his contract, and that's the thing. You still got to pay Lamar Jackson, who's not going to come in for a discount.
Got to pay Lamar Jackson, who's more valuable with contracts, trades. I get all that. I get all that. The question was shifting the landscape of the AFC.
Yeah.
Going to Baltimore would have
fundamentally changed the conversation about the AFC.
Yeah, because with Tennessee, even with Julio Jones,
he doesn't play defense.
That's the problem. They lost more defensively in the last 2 years than adding a Julio Jones increases them on the offensive side. Tennessee is not a good, and not to mention, understand this, they do have a new offensive coordinator this year. His name is Todd Downing. He had 1 year as an OC in Oakland after being their quarterback coach, and it was the least inventive offense I've seen in the pro game in my life.
But he doesn't have to be inventive, though. just give the ball to Derrick Henry. Just give him the ball and get out of the way.
That's
or throw it over the top, right? Play action, throw it over the top.
Just give him the damn ball.
Yeah.
The dude
That's going to
just
be my
shot.
point. How does that interview go? All right, here you are. We got a film situation up there. Put it up there. What do you do? Hand the ball off to Derrick Henry. Good.
It's good.
What do you do in this situation? Hand the ball off to Derrick
Hand the
Henry.
ball to Derrick
All right,
Henry.
one more question before we make a decision. What are you going to do? Hand the ball off to Derrick Henry. Okay, when can you start?
Yeah.
That's how that interview went.
I mean, seriously, like the formula for success is already there, and unfortunately, Julio Jones does not play running back, so I don't see him having that big of an overall impact. He will
Tennessee,
bring that guy out of a player out of the box, but it's still going to be for Derrick Henry.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I got a couple of pop culture type ish. One of them is a two-parter. All right. Apparently, June is National Candy Month. Just found this out while we're recording the show. National Candy Month in the month of June. A study via Google, which looked at search trends for candies in each state. The most popular candy, so pump the brakes or not, the best candy, according to the Google searches per state, is Skittles.
Oh, pump the brakes. Okay, first of all, what are we
It's
qualifying as candy?
any chocolate bars, candies like Skittles and so
Skittles don't
forth.
have a chance. If you're throwing chocolate in there, it's Skittles.
Number one in the
Skittles is so
country.
far down the road. I could think of 20 candies before I think of Skittles. Right now.
I'd agree with that. I can't tell you the last time I had Skittles. 7 states, by the way. 7 states: Florida, Georgia, Nebraska, New Mexico, Vermont, Virginia, and Texas all have Skittles as their favorite candy.
That's messed up.
Look, Starburst is better than Skittles right now.
It's like you're reading my mind. The number one candy in Arizona, Starburst. So pump the brakes or not, Starburst is the best candy.
no,
Pump
pump
the
the brakes on that too.
All right. I'm guessing, Grose, you pump the brakes on Skittles too?
Pump the brake on Skittles, too.
All right, best.
You know what Skittles are good for, though?
Huh.
Like, if you get Skittles and you kind of chew them up, you can replicate what it looks like when you're spitting tobacco without the nastiness of tobacco.
Wow. Hold up. Yes.
Wait.
It's true, though.
By the way, Starburst number one, not only in Arizona, but California, New Jersey, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, and South Carolina.
Okay, chocolate is going to get a bad rap in Arizona because it can melt.
Melty.
Good call.
So you're not going to have the Kaiser Sosage. You're not going to have the usual suspects.
This is what's criminal. Only one state has Reese's Peanut Butter Cups as the best candy. It's West Virginia. That's criminal.
And that's a
that deserves,
backward ass
That's a
state.
hold up there.
Okay.
All right, so let's do this. If number one candy, if you're going to the store right now and buying your number one candy, what
Reese's
is
Peanut
it?
Butter Cups.
M&M's. Peanut.
Nevada, the only state with M&M. And it
Peanut
doesn't,
or plain?
it doesn't say if it's peanuts or not.
Gets
It just
hot
says
there,
M&M.
too, man. They melt there.
Yeah, but they melt in your mouth, not in your hand.
Wow. I see what you did there. I see what you did there, brother. That's nice. I see what you did there.
Full circle on the show.
Got nothing.
All right, last one because we got dad jokes to get
Back
to.
to
And
you,
damn
Sean.
It, it's the best part of the whole show. There is a survey that found over 1/3 of us would continue to eat their food if they found a hair in it at a restaurant.
How many?
Over 1/3 of people. So here's what it says. 25% of us said that they'd be grossed out, but they'd continue to eat the food anyway. And 10% said, not a big deal. So 35% of people say they're good if they find a hair in their food at a restaurant. So pump the brakes or not. You're eating the food still?
Are you kidding?
I mean, I'm not eating it, but
Pump the
35% people say they're good.
So if a third said they wouldn't eat it, that means 2/3 would eat it.
No. 1/3 said they would still eat it.
Right.
Yeah.
2/3 won't eat.
Oh, 2/3 won't eat. I heard. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Are you eating it, Grose? Have you ever found a hair and been like, okay?
What if you make it yourself and it's your hair? Does that count?
Well, location.
That's true.
If it's at home, then that's a different spin.
Okay, a whole different story.
But if you're at a public restaurant and you find a hair, if I find a hair,
That's true, it ain't yours.
Ain't yours.
it ain't mine. So it's most definitely not getting eaten. Because
Does it matter how big the hair is?
No.
Like if it's long, that's awful, right? You pull it, it just keeps coming out. That's just gross.
No. Any kind of hair anywhere on my food is not getting
It's
eaten.
not eaten.
I'm
no,
not down with
I
it.
agree with you.
I'm not down with that.
I was shocked when I saw that. That's why I had to bring it up.
I mean, full disclosure, I'm bald and I'm manscaped, so it's never gonna be my hair.
in any way, shape, or form. It's
Any
not
way,
me.
shape, or form.
Wow.
I mean, because that's just nuts.
TMI here.
Oh, my. We don't even need the dad joke.
The lights.
This guy.
I heard him. I'm not acknowledging that anymore because I prefer to think that sometimes people don't even hear it when they do it, which is what my defense is. Did I really say that? Oh, that's not what I meant.
All right, this is the rules for dad jokes as we get out of here. You're always going to get one of these. Mm-hmm. If it's a quality dad joke, you're going to get one. If it's just a solid joke, you're going to get some laughter. Now, if the dad joke is god-awful, you get one of these. And in the rare occasion that we all just lose it, standing up.
All right.
So those are the rules of dad jokes. Where are we headed today?
You guys ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I recently started a dating app for chickens. You guys are already laughing. Come on.
Where you your delivery's getting better every week.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not my normal day job. It's just to make hens meet.
I'll give it a laughter. It got a laughter.
Y'all set me up though, because I had it. I was gonna hold it together until you guys started laughing. When you guys started laughing, I couldn't hold it
Your
anymore.
delivery's getting better and better. You see him perk up. He like puts on a show now. That's good.
I mean,
It's taken on a life of its own.
It has. I mean, my favorite was the one you told me about the cow. Where'd the cow go?
Yeah, do an encore. Do an encore. Where's the cow joke?
I don't remember.
What do you call it? What do you call a cow with a twitch?
Oh yeah. What do you call a cow with a twitch? Beef jerky.
That one gets standing O.
Oh my God.
My, that's gonna do it.
I got one more.
All right.
Trying to get out of here.
Keep fighting. What do you got?
What did 50 Cent do when he got hungry? 58.
You should have quit while you were ahead, man. You should have quit while you were.
Yeah, I would have
That's
probably.
pretty good, though.
I'm just saying.
Grose, do you get it? Because
Yeah, I got it.
Right.
Shut up. I got it. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Training Gross. Subscribe on Apple or Spotify,
iTunes,
wherever you
Google,
get your
Google,
podcast.
you name it.
And give us a follow on Twitter @Training Gross. We'll see you next time.
I holla.